This Valentine's Day, celebrate the one you love the most with Hallmark cards at Walgreens. Valentine's Day is the best time to send your favorite person a reminder of just how much they mean to you. A Hallmark card is a super simple and beautiful way to say how grateful you are for the love you two share. Don't forget, Valentine's Day is Saturday, February 14th. Visit Walgreens today to find a Hallmark card that shows just how much you love them. Because love lives here.
Good morning, and welcome to the General Motors Company fourth quarter and full year 2025 conference call. During the opening remarks, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. After the opening remarks, we will conduct a question-and-answer session. We are asking analysts to limit their questions to one and a brief follow-up. To ask a question, press star then 1 on your telephone keypad to join the queue. To withdraw your question, press star then 2. As a reminder, this conference call is being recorded Tuesday, January 27th, 2026. I would now like to turn the conference over to Ashish Kohli, GM's Vice President of Investor Relations.
Thanks, Amanda, and good morning, everyone. We appreciate you joining us as we review GM's financial results for the fourth quarter and full year 2025. Our conference call materials were issued this morning and are available on GM's Investor Relations website. Joining us today are Mary Barra, GM's Chair and CEO, along with Paul Jacobson, GM's Executive Vice President and CFO. Susan Sheffield, President and CEO of GM Financial, will also be joining us for the Q&A portion. On today's call, management will make forward-looking statements about our expectations. These statements are subject to risks and uncertainties that could cause our actual results to differ materially. These risks and uncertainties include the factors identified in our filings with the SEC. Please review the Safe Harbor statement on the first page of our presentation, as the content of this call will be governed by this language.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Kilowatt, a podcast about electric vehicles, renewable energy, autonomous driving, and much, much more. My name is Bodie, and I am your host. And I because I like to be a clean podcaster, not a dirty podcaster, I took a shower and shaved before doing this episode, especially for you folks. I just touched my nose and I realized I got myself on my lips shaving. So I'm going to do this introduction and then I'm going to go get some tissue to stick on there until it scabs over. But it was a lot more blood than I thought there should be on there. So I must have really got myself. It was a new razor. So I might have been a little over aggressive because I was trying to get back to do this so that I could go to bed tonight. So I'm trying very hard to get this done at before Saturday. We'll see how it goes. It is currently 10 o'clock at night. So we might get it or we might not. Either way, we're starting. And that is where we need to be. My audio sounded weird, so I changed some things, and hopefully this makes it sound better. I think it sounds a little bit better, but it sounded weird in my headphones. Anyway, today we are going to do GM's Q4 2025 earnings call. And I haven't listened to it yet, but I am doing something different that I haven't done in previous earnings calls. Well, kind of. I used to get the transcript for the earnings calls through different services, but then those services wanted to charge me money, and I didn't want to pay the money for the transcripts. So now what I've got is I have this app for Mac called Whisper, and it uses OpenAI's Whisper service. So the app is aptly named. Recommended by Allison Sheridan, by the way. Shout out to Allison. But I was today when I was preparing for the show, I was like, why don't I just shove this into Whisper and then I can kind of search out where they talk about different EVs, or even possibly just skim through the transcript to see if I recognize something that's interesting rather than listening to the entire earnings call, which can, sometimes be very boring and dry and not related to what we talk about on this show. I save you from having to do that, but I don't want to do it either. It's not fun. So that's how we're going to do today's show. So hopefully I don't miss anything. This is a first attempt, let's say. All right, let's go ahead and get into Mary's opening remarks. And obviously, like always, this is going to be heavily edited just to be specific for what we talk about on this show. We're not going to hit, unless it's relevant, we're not going to hit the ICE car business or financing or any of the other things that they happen to talk about on earnings calls. All right, let's go ahead and jump into, I was going to say Ernie. I have a friend named Ernie. Let's go ahead and jump into Mary's opening remarks.
We are also operating in a U.S. regulatory and policy environment that is increasingly aligned with customer demand. This allows us to onshore more production to help meet strong demand for our ICE vehicles. We continue to believe in EVs, and our portfolio brought almost 100,000 new customers to GM last year. We know EV drivers don't often go back to ICE, so we'll continue executing our plan to dramatically reduce costs and to be well positioned for the future. This will require continued investment, but at much lower levels, and I'm confident in our path to profitability.
Okay, so I'm just going to jump in real quick. They actually, there was some other things that she talked about that was, like I said, not related to this program, like, margin range and EBIT and all that kind of stuff that we don't really talk about, the financial stuff that we don't really talk about. But she did mention earlier, and I didn't play the clip, where she talked about how they sold the Ultium line, and that is going to help them kind of lead towards profitability. And the Ultium was the platform, or Ultium was the platform that the batteries and the powertrain were based off of. So that was interesting, but it was like 10 seconds throwaway comment. And now she says, this is a direct quote, we're also operating in a U.S. regulatory and policy environment that is increasingly aligned with customer demand. Now, that may or may not be true. I'm not saying that statement is a lie, because honestly, I don't know enough about the U.S. auto market as a whole to say, and consumer demand as a whole to say whether that's true or not. I do know that EVs are on the rise, but whatever. But what I want to say here is the U.S. government basically relaxed some regulations, and then on the regulations that they didn't want to relax or couldn't relax, the U.S. government just set the penalties down to zero. So what this statement should say is we are also operating in a U.S. regulatory and policy environment that is increasingly aligned with customer demand and GM's financial goals. That's what it should say, or whatever their other goals are. Like, this benefits a GM. Let's not couch this in the customers are demanding it, because they're not. They're demanding a lot of things that you're not providing. So yeah, that's just kind of put me in my feels a little bit. Now, she also said that they were going to reduce some of the spend that they have for EVs. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, because Ford kind of started off strong in the EV space, and GM looked like they were floundering. And now GM's got several really good EVs. And I mean, I would say like direct competitors in terms of quality of an EV. Maybe might not like the way they implement some things, but in terms of how good their EVs are, they could compare to Tesla. There's some advantages and disadvantages on both sides, but GM's in a good spot with EVs. And it sounds like they're going to slow down investment on that, and get to some sort of profitability. Now, I will also, to say in fairness, GM was spending a lot of money on EVs and losing a lot of money on EVs. So it's not like this is something they could do forever. But we'll have to listen, keep those things in the back of your head, because sometimes they're foreshadowing what the rest of the year is going to look like. Heck, what the rest of the earnings call is going to look like. So just, like I said, keep that in the back of your head. All right, let's continue with Mary's opening remarks.
The growth of OnStar services and Super Cruise further underscores our confidence. In 2025, OnStar had a record 12 million subscribers, including more than 620,000 Super Cruise subscribers, achieving nearly 80% year-over-year growth. OnStar fleet subscriptions hit 2 million, which is 2 times any other competitor. This year, we will continue to grow our Super Cruise business in North America and expand into South Korea, the Middle East, and Europe. We expect our deferred revenue from software and services to be approximately $7.5 billion by the end of this year, up nearly 40% from 2025. We are also confident in the turnaround of our China business and our growing new energy vehicle portfolio. They are now about 50% of sales in China and profitable across all price points.
Okay, so I hope we're going to hear a little bit more about their new energy vehicles in China. Um, Moving past that, though, GM Super Cruise is, similar to Tesla's full self-driving. Both of these products do different things better than the other product. I would say that Tesla is certainly ahead of where GM is in terms of full self-driving. Not super far ahead, but ahead of them. One of the things I found interesting is there are like the 12 million subscribers to OnStar. OnStar is all sorts of different things, so let's ignore those numbers. The 620,000 Super Cruise subscribers, I think, is interesting because that's the actual full self-driving package. They're not all that far away from where Tesla is, especially when you consider that Tesla's been selling their Super Cruise package, or excuse me, autonomous driving package for much, much longer than GM has. And GM is, expanding their Super Cruise business to South Korea, the Middle East, and Europe. Now, here is my question, though, because, Tesla has like 1.1 million full self-driving subscribers and people who purchase total. Let's try that again. Tesla has 1.1 million people who have either purchased the service or subscribed to the service. And GM says they have 620,000 Super Cruise subscribers because you can't purchase their service. It's only a subscription, which is great. However, how many of those subscribers, or how many of the 620,000 people that they are saying have this service, or cars that have this service, are actually paying for it and not part of the, you get this free when you buy the car for X amount of time, and then after that you have to pay for it. If it's all 620,000, that's pretty impressive. If it's 400,000, it's still okay, but we should probably break that out as to some of these people are getting it for free and we expect them to come over, but not everybody's going to do that. So yeah, so there's that. And I'm not saying that GM is, lying or any of these other things. I'm just saying it would be nice to know if this number is actual subscribers or people who bought the car and they're currently on their, like they technically paid for the service for 3 years up front or whatever, and they're currently on their that free 2 years or whatever it is. And I did go and look. GM Super Cruise starts at $40 a month, or you can pay $399 a year. So still pretty, reasonable. All right, let's continue on with Mary's opening remarks.
Then in 2028, we expect to launch our breakthrough LMR battery chemistry. LMR will help us reduce cell and pack costs by several $1,000s. Also in 2028, we expect to launch our second generation software-defined vehicle architecture for ICE vehicles and EVs. It will unite every major system from propulsion to infotainment and safety on a single high-speed compute core. The performance upgrade includes 10 times more OTA capacity and 1,000 times more bandwidth, allowing our vehicles to get better, smarter, and deliver more value to our customers over time. It's also an enabler for our eyes-off, hands-off driving technology. This technology and our new software architecture will both launch on the Cadillac Escalade IQ in 2028. With our Super Cruise experience, the expertise we brought in-house from Cruise, and our learnings from millions of miles of fully autonomous driving, we believe we have everything we need to deliver a safe, reliable, and highly capable system that customers will embrace. Safety is key to building trust in new technologies, as we've demonstrated with Super Cruise. For our eyes-off solution, we are building in redundancy with LiDAR, radar, and cameras, and we will begin on highways.
All right, a couple of things that I want to talk about here. First of all, where did I highlight this? So the LMR batteries is a new chemistry. It is lithium manganese rich. It's supposed to be more energy dense than LFP batteries, the lithium iron phosphate batteries, but less expensive and not as energy dense as the nickel manganese cobalt batteries or the NMC batteries. So that's the advantage. It kind of sits right in that pocket. Now, as far as their software-defined vehicle, we don't know much about that, but it sounds cool. I love that it's going to, push autonomous driving forward with the eyes-off, hands-off driving technology, level 3 technology. I did find it interesting and, funny, but not super funny, that it says here, what does it say? It says the technology and our new software architecture will both launch on the Cadillac Escalade IQ in 2028, which is great, but that's not a car most people can afford. That's $100,000+ car. So yeah, interesting. One other thing I wanted to kind of highlight here that she said is safety is key to building trust in new technologies, as we demonstrated with Super Cruise. If you remember, and I just point this out because I find this comment funny, but if you remember, Cruise, which was their autonomous driving efforts, when I say that, I mean autonomous taxi efforts, a Cruise vehicle actually hit a person on a bicycle and then drug them off to the side of the road in San Francisco. And that was they paused everything, but ultimately that was the downfall of Cruise. But there are tons of stories where people in San Francisco were just not fans of Cruise. Now, I'm not saying, that the GM wouldn't eventually have figured this out had that not happened. But yeah, that the safety is key to building. They had some issues with Cruise. Let's just put it that way.
This Valentine's Day, celebrate the one you love the most with Hallmark cards at Walgreens. Valentine's Day is the best time to send your favorite person a reminder of just how much they mean to you. A Hallmark card is a super simple and beautiful way to say how grateful you are for the love you two share. Don't forget, Valentine's Day is Saturday, February 14th. Visit Walgreens today to find a Hallmark card that shows just how much you love them. Because love lives here.
O'Reilly. Check engine, ABS, or maintenance light on? Take the guesswork out of your warning lights with O'Reilly Veriscan. The service is free and provides a report with solutions verified by ASE certified master technicians. And if you need help, we could recommend a shop for you. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today. O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Matt Money Smith here from Believe in Chargers, talking to you about the Game Time app. What is it? Tickets. I like going to sporting events, right? And there's nothing I hate more than hitting checkout and bang, my cost has gone up by 20%. That is not going to happen with Game Time. First of all, you get 100% legitimate tickets at the best price. That is the Game Time guarantee. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, they're going to credit you 110% of the difference. On top of that, they've got zone deals. That means when you choose a section and you let Game Time choose the seats, you can get a discount that way. Seat views, panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and they have that lowest price guarantee. What you see is what you pay. So use our code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. $20 off your first purchase. Again, download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use the code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code BLEAV for $20 off.
All right. Next up is Paul, and I'm forgetting Paul's name, but Paul is the Chief Financial Officer. I don't honestly know if I'm going to play anything from Paul or not, so I'm going to listen to what he has to say, and I'll get back to you. Good news. He didn't have much to say about EVs and nothing that I could really talk about, but just because it was boring. But I will say this first question that we're going to hear wasn't the first question of the earnings call from analysts, but the first question we're going to hear for this show, I think kind of sums up GM's position on where EVs fit into their fleet and how they're going to mix in hybrids as well as, internal combustion, full gas and diesel cars. So let's go ahead and listen to that.
As a second question, I wanted to just ask about the dynamics of your product portfolio. And within it, first, maybe you could just address, the fixed cost base that you have. You still have all of your EV programs intact. You still have much of the battery capacity intact. This was set for a higher volume outlook. To what extent does this portfolio align with what's going to likely be higher near-term ICE mix? And then maybe you could just address the potential to add hybrids into the portfolio? Just how much more do we have to see the portfolio and the fixed cost base shift to adjust to this new reality that we have?
Well, I'll start and then I'll turn it over to Paul for some of the financial piece of it. But we think we have the right portfolio. We have an incredibly strong internal combustion engine portfolio, as Paul mentioned, with the new trucks coming out. And unlike many others, we invested in having a dedicated EV platform that gives us a foundation for the portfolio we have. As we've said, the investments we're making now in EVs will be very much focused on cost reduction, like LMR. We also have teams on each of our EVs to continue to take cost out beyond the battery. And then, we have announced in the past that we will have some hybrids in key segments. So I think we're going to have the right portfolio. And we also are focused on the end game. We know once somebody drives an EV, they rarely go back to internal combustion engine. And we also, a big enabler of EV adoption is going to be charging. And last year, the level 2 chargers increased by 25%. So EV adoption is going to grow over time. We think we're well positioned there. So, we were very, I think, thoughtful about the way that we adjusted capacity in light of a very dramatic change in the regulatory environment, as well as the eliminating the consumer tax credit.
Yeah, just to add to that, Dan, I think, as we went through the restructuring, we were mindful of, where is the excess capacity that we know we're not going to need for a long time, because we had built up for a very different regulatory environment, as Mary had said. But we're also cognizant of making sure that we preserve capacity to be able to pivot and rotate where we need to get the cost savings. So particularly as it relates to battery capacity, we've got enough to be able to transition to LMR and to LFP as those projects get underway over the next couple of years. So it really was trying to look at, what is the right short-term decision, but also how do we balance that against long term and where we know it's going to go or we believe it's going to go in the future. And as far as vehicle programs, remember with the product cycle that the industry has, some of these decisions were made years ago, and we have to do our best to be able to pivot to where demand is going to be. And I think if you look at this management team and what it's accomplished over the last several years in the midst of a lot of uncertainty, I think we've got what it takes to be able to respond and meet the consumer where they are as they continue to evolve.
Okay. In an odd way, this makes me feel better. Not great, but better. Maybe we'll get, and I know E-revs is not what we want necessarily, but maybe that is the actual transition that we need, as everything kind of develops, with being the E-rev being the generator that powers the battery instead of, just an all electric vehicle. Maybe that's something we do actually need. I don't know. I'm warming to the idea, especially when you think, or when you consider that we have these vehicles with a 200 kilowatt hour battery in some cases, and they have, 320 miles of range. That's a big battery for 320 miles of range. It might be cheaper to put a small generator in there, give it 180 miles of range, and run that 90% of the time on full battery electric, and then the other 10% of the time would be off of the generator when you need it. I don't know. I'm warming to the idea. I don't think it's not my optimal, obviously, but in a world of abandoning EVs versus having something that's transitional, I'm on the side of being more transitional in terms of that. So yeah, I feel better. Still don't feel great, but I feel better. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our next question. In a second. Here we go. Let's move on to our next question. Oh, before we move on to the next question, Paul, in his CFO opening remarks, did say that they expect to pay $3 to $4 billion in tariffs for 2026. So just FYI, I thought that was worth mentioning. All right, let's get to that question.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Joe Spack with UBS. Your line is open.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. First, I guess, bigger picture, Mary, I wanted to go back to some of your comments on portfolio, and you mentioned hybrids. I mean, that's a pretty broad term nowadays with, traditional plugins and EREVs. So I was wondering if you could maybe shed a little bit more light on how you're seeing that portfolio evolving. And then is that considered in the 10 to 12 billion CapEx you've guided for the next couple of years? And I guess most importantly, yes, powertrain, I think, is going to be part of the consumer decision, but the features in the car are seemingly becoming more important, and you're sort of highlighting that with some of the Super Cruise and other software. So, will all these vehicles be able to use that next gen architecture you showed that I think is supposed to launch in 28?
Sure. Joe, a lot packed into that question, but first of all, any products that I've talked about are comprehended in the $10 to $12 billion capital. So yes, SDB, our next generation software-defined platform, and Super Cruise will be available across both ICE and EV platforms. And from a hybrid perspective, again, we're looking at where are the segments that there's the most demand for hybrids that are important from our total portfolio. So I'm not going to give you any specifics other than, we're looking at a segment by segment for what we feel that we need to have to make sure we compete. And I'll just reiterate that we're, in the last 4 years, even as others have brought on hybrids, we're still growing share. And that, I think, just indicates that we have the right product portfolio. So, and lastly, I just want to comment. You're absolutely right. The propulsion system of the vehicle is one distinguisher, but people are looking for their vehicle to do more, and that's where I think we also are going to be distinguishing ourselves as a full line OEM that's been around for a while, able to have a very modern electrical architecture that will then be the foundation for offering more services, AI assistance, as well as continuing to grow Super Cruise and into our eyes off, hands off that we've announced for 2028. So I feel very confident that this is going to be another area where GM distinguishes itself from others with what we have planned and what we'll be rolling out. And the team is excited and it's on track.
You know what? That was an answer, but I'm not sure it was an answer. The thing that I was most interested in is whether or not they would consider EREVs, and she didn't give an answer on that. But I'm guessing that they're looking very closely at what Scout is doing and what Ram is doing, because Ram is supposed to have an EREV truck as well. However, Stellantis, as we know, here in the U.S., not super great at getting EVs out, or even I looked the other day on Chrysler's website. It might even have been for this show, but I looked at the other day at Chrysler's website. They sell one product right now, and it happens to be the minivan. That's it. That's all they sell. One product. And I believe they're taking that plug-in hybrid version of the minivan away. And correct me if I'm wrong on that. But yeah, nutty. All right, so let's go ahead and get to our next question.
And then maybe just coming back to Super Cruise, you mentioned expanding that into some international markets. Can you just remind us what regulatory approvals are needed to do that? And also, from a functionality standpoint, can you maybe just give us a roadmap for what improvements consumers might expect to see going forward, whether that be point to point? Just kind of wondering what the progression of that looks like over the next few years before you get to full eyes off, hands off L3 with that next gen platform. Thank you.
So, Andrew, we can get you the specific. We have a roadmap that we're working to where we continue to expand and add more features that we haven't announced yet, so stay tuned on that. And as to the regulatory specifics, I think I don't have them top of mind, but I know the team is working and the rollout is planned, and I don't think there's any barriers for stopping the global expansion that we have of Super Cruise.
This was a fantastic question, and not a very satisfying answer. I would like to know more about what GM's roadmap looks like, and it looks like we're going to have to wait to find that out, but it would be nice to know, to kind of have a better sense of what they're planning. And, it might be that they're not ready to share the roadmap, and that's totally fine. Or it might be that they're not ready to share the roadmap because they don't have those things quite figured out yet. It kind of depends. So we'll have to see. All right, let's move on to our next question. And you know what? Before we get to the next question, I should say the question before this was about GM and kind of how they're looking at margins and inventory and a bunch of other stuff in regards to their new truck rollouts. Because right now they've paused production or slowed down production, and then eventually, not too far away from now, they're going to roll out some new pickup trucks. So when you hear them reference the pickup trucks, that's what they're referencing. All right, let's go ahead and get to the question.
I was hoping you could share kind of at a high level what you're assuming, the declines in EV volume this year, how much of that could translate to incremental ICE demand for GM, and kind of how does that affect your inventory and kind of wholesale volume planning throughout the year?
Well, EJ, it's a great question. I don't think anyone really knows what the steady state EV demand will be in this new environment. I think we're still seeing, we saw a fairly substantial pull ahead before the consumer credit went away, and so looking at other geographies that had EV incentives and then took it away. It literally was 6 months before we really started to understand what steady state would be. Having said that, we're looking across all aspects of where we can have additional volume. Paul already answered the fact that we ended the year with a lower inventory below the 50 to 60 days. So we're going to continue to look at where the opportunities to get more. With the full-size truck downtime, we're pretty tight, but the team usually does a great job of pulling out more production when it's needed. As an old manufacturing person, those are the challenges that you love to have. So again, we're going to see where the EV market is, and then we're going to maximize as much as we can from an internal combustion engine perspective.
Okay, so the part of this that I want to address is where she talks about, when the EV incentives were running out, they kind of had a big push for EVs. And then it's going to take some time. And she said 6 months to kind of figure out where the EV demand actually sits without the incentives. My general feeling is that 2026 is going to be the year of the EV downfall until 2027 when people start buying them again. Folks who were planning on buying an EV, maybe not necessarily in 2025, might have accelerated their purchase to take advantage, here in the United States anyway, take advantage of that $7,500 federal tax credit. So that's great. However, you don't need to buy a car every single year. So for the folks who were interested and could afford to buy at that time, they already bought. And then you couple that with the, groceries are more expensive. Gas right now is actually reasonably priced. But if you're looking to buy an EV, who cares what gas costs? And gas fluctuates in price anyway. But at the moment, at least in the community that I live in, you can find it for under $3 a gallon. But, other things are expensive. Like I said, I think last episode, I'm looking at, I have a deck off the back of my bedroom that is condemned. Like I won't let anybody in it or on it, I guess, or underneath it. And then we have to paint our house. So lumber prices are very expensive right now. If I would have done this deck in 2018 when I moved in the house, it would have been a much cheaper expense compared to now. I didn't need to paint my house when I moved in because it had already been painted. Unfortunately, they did not do the proper steps, and some moisture had kind of wicked up and damaged some of the stucco. So that's something we gotta get fixed, and then we're gonna paint it and have it done right. So these are the joys of owning a house. But I'm telling, just from that, from the prices that I've been quoted. One person quoted me $15,000 to build a deck that's roughly 8 feet by 17 feet wide and 7 feet tall. Yeah. I was like, no, thank you. Not in your wildest dreams, friend. He was very nice though, but $15,000 for that deck. Anyway, it's still not cheap. Like the person we went with, I trust. He seems like a solid person, and he's been super attentive, more attentive than anybody else that reached out and gave us a quote. But he needs to make money. He needs to be able to pay his people, and I still need to be able to, be able to afford the deck. Right? There's all that demand. So I said all that to one, vent, but two, to say this. It's like it just costs a lot of money to run a household right now. So for someone who had an opportunity to buy an EV, someone who was EV motivated, we'll say, and they had the opportunity to buy it in October, as many people I think as could at that time, that made financial sense for them to buy an EV during that time, there's going to be a lull in 26, 27, 28, right? But as more people come to EVs and we start seeing the R2 enter the market and whatever Lucid's got coming into the market, I think closer to 2027, we're going to see a pickup. So 2026 is going to be a down year. It's going to be the death of the EV. But when we get to 2027, I think it'll start picking up again. So prepare yourself for that.
This Valentine's Day, celebrate the one you love the most with Hallmark cards at Walgreens. Valentine's Day is the best time to send your favorite person a reminder of just how much they mean to you. A Hallmark card is a super simple and beautiful way to say how grateful you are for the love you two share. Don't forget, Valentine's Day is Saturday, February 14th. Visit Walgreens today to find a Hallmark card that shows just how much you love them. Because love lives here.
The secret is out. With millions of younger-looking customers across the country, Plexiderm is one of the most highly sought-after products on the market. It visibly shrinks under-eye bags and smooths out crow's feet in minutes, and the effects last up to 10 hours. Influencers love it, magazines feature it, and people just can't get enough of it. As a matter of fact, Elle magazine gave it an Editor's Choice Award as Best Instant Wrinkle Filler for 2025. In as little as 10 minutes, Plexiderm reduces the appearance of fine lines, wrinkles, and those dreaded under-eye bags. So yes, you can look years younger in minutes, and the effects last for hours. No surgery, no gimmicks, just results. The best news, you can try Plexiderm for only $14.95. Plus, get free shipping. Don't wait. Order Plexiderm today. Visit plexiderm.com/special. That's plexiderm.com/special. Paid for by Sheer Science.
Okay, that was a long diatribe on my part. I apologize. All right, let's move on to our next question.
Our next question comes from Ryan Brinkman with JP Morgan. Your line is open.
Good morning. Thanks for taking my question, which is on the emissions regulation assumption baked into the 26 guide. The outlook for 500 to 750 million of savings there from no longer needing to purchase those compliant the credits. It seems a bit less than the roughly, I think, $1 billion annually that you've maybe been spending. Is that because some of the purchases sit outside the U.S. or because some U.S. regulatory credit purchases, maybe at the state level, will need to continue in some form, or what is the right way to think about that?
Yeah, Ryan, obviously the compliance requirements are pretty complicated. You've got both state, federal, local, and international as well. But as we've talked about, the credits were roughly split between CAFE and GHG. So CAFE, we know we don't need to purchase credits as the administration has already zeroed out the CAFE penalties across the board. We took a charge for that in the third quarter and expect that to result in some year-over-year savings in 26 versus 25. And then GHG is still pending with the administration. We're assuming that ultimately that gets resolved over time, but there's going to be a lag effect as the administration works through the regulatory process to accomplish what their objectives are on GHG. So when we purchase credits, we amortize them over the time, the remaining life of those credits. So that's where you're probably seeing a little bit of a disconnect versus the P&L and the cash.
All right. So what they're talking about here is the regulatory credits. I'm sure most of you already know this, but the regulatory credits that companies like Ford and GM and Stellantis would purchase from companies like Rivian and, Lucid and Tesla and that kind of thing. So they were able to build their vehicles that use more gasoline or diesel, fossil fuels. They were able to build those, but they had to, have some sort of regulatory credit in order. They had to meet a certain threshold in, we'll say, clean energy. Like we talked about, the penalties, obviously the government is complicated and there's lots of regulations. So it's not to say all penalties, but the biggest one was the CAFE. Those penalties were knocked down to zero. So there's no penalty in these companies building, fossil fuel guzzling machines. Now, I want to be clear here. I don't necessarily think that tomorrow we should be 100% electric car. I definitely don't think that is practical. It would. I do think this is a transition. I don't think that saying that you can't have gas-powered cars as of 2028 or even 2030 is reasonable here in the U.S. anyway, because there have been so many things. It takes so long for a car to be from the design point to the sale point. It's a very long time. So I don't know that that's necessarily a reasonable ask, nor do I think that the technology's there for all the different segments to effectively become electric, right? So in that regard, I am not anti gasoline powered car. I have a hybrid and I have an electric car. There is a place for these things in people's lives. We could have afforded to buy another electric car, but that didn't make sense for what we use the hybrid for. So we decided to go with the hybrid. And it's been a great car. So I just want to be clear here. But in terms of, those regulations that the U.S. Basically set to zero, it's a huge benefit. You're hearing him. What did he say? Like $600 to $700 million. They're saving on. He said $500 to $700 million they're saving from no longer needing to purchase those compliancy the credits, the compliant credits. But they were spending $1 billion. So where's the other $500 to $300 million going? And it sounds like there's still some regulatory credits that they do have to purchase, but they're kind of hoping that those. We're trying to find. Let's see. He's talking about the GHG, assuming he says we're the GHG. He said, and then the GHG is still pending with the administration. We're assuming that ultimately that gets resolved over time. Again, this is a resolve. This is from GM's standpoint, maybe not necessarily for what's good for people, what's good for, the planet. And I am not like some greeny tree hugger person. I do believe in taking care of our planet. I do believe that cars cause pollution. There's not a lot of people that are going to debate me on that. Whether or not, we will tend to have a debate on whether vehicles cause climate change or not, the vehicle emissions cause climate change or not. But I'm not here to make that argument. Like when I talk to people and they disagree with me in terms of the climate change thing, because I think that is real, and I think cars cause or contribute to that. Say that. My argument goes away from the climate change part of things and into the pollution part of things, because we can all agree that sitting around and huffing diesel exhaust or gasoline exhaust, it's not good for you. In the fire service, we have these big diesel trucks, and then there's these big exhaust pipes, and we stand around while we're on a scene. Basically, the trucks are running because they have to, And we're basically just sucking down all that exhaust. Now, I've been very fortunate and I don't have cancer, but I do not fool myself for one little second that I'm not going to get cancer. And it's probably going to be a contributor, a big contributor. It's going to be how much time I've spent around diesel exhaust. That is like, that's just a fact of what my job is. But that also means that anybody else that is standing around any other type of, anybody who's being exposed to those emissions also has the potential to get cancer from that. They did a study a long time ago where they took the umbilical cords of babies, like the placenta and the umbilical cord, and then they, opened it up, and there was like pollution, emissions from vehicles inside the umbilical cord. So it's not as if not very many people argue with me on that. And that's a point we can agree on. So whether or not you think that GHG is greenhouse gas, but whether or not you think that, the cars cause or contribute to global warming is irrelevant. We can all agree that they're not good for us in a health perspective. I don't think, to my knowledge, I've had a discussion with anybody that has disagreed with that part of it. So that's tend to where I come from these things. And, I do believe that they do contribute to climate change. However, I also know that I'm a dumb fireman, and I don't have the background or the knowledge to argue it in my point in a very intelligent way. So that's why I choose to stick with, the part we can all agree on. Anyway, the point here is, with the regulatory fines going to zero, effectively automakers are able to do whatever they want because there's no downside for them. Even let's just say they saved $500 million a year on regulatory credits. That's pretty good, pretty decent. Next year they might save $700 million a year, but that comes at another cost. So, okay. Should we listen to the next one? Let's listen to the next one.
Our last question will come from Mark Delaney with Goldman Sachs. Your line is open.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much for taking my question. The company is expecting Super Cruise revenue to be $400 million in 26, up from $234 million at the end of 2025. Can you help us better understand what's driving such a big step up this year in Super Cruise revenue? And then as you think about that broader OnStar digital services business momentum that you spoke about, are there other key areas you're seeing momentum beyond Super Cruise, or is Super Cruise the big driver of digital services?
Yeah, well, Mark, thanks for hanging on for the whole call. Appreciate you get your last question in. The Super Cruise revenue is a couple of things. So remember, when we sell a vehicle with Super Cruise, we include 3 years of prepaid services on that. So that balance then amortizes over a 3-year period. So what you're seeing is growth in those initial rates as we ramp up production and sales of vehicles equipped with Super Cruise. The second aspect of it, which we're continuing to see really good penetration and attachment rates, is on the renewal. So at the end of 3 years, customers are approached with, would they like to subscribe? And we've seen attachment rates in the low 40% range, with people stepping up and renewing that. So that's where you're seeing a lot of the growth in Super Cruise. In OnStar, we include an OnStar Basics package with the sale of vehicles that amortizes over the life of that period. But it also, what it does is gives us an engagement opportunity with the consumer that is really laying the foundation for, number one, enhanced OnStar services currently, but also then second, you look at GM rewards, you look at opportunities when we get software-defined vehicles down the road. It's really a big step function. So that's where you're seeing a lot of the deferred revenue growing and coming in at very attractive software-like margins.
I just had a funny. So I podcast in my basement, and you can hear people, my family in the other room. But I podcast in my basement, I got my shingle shot today, as well as my as well as my pneumonia shot, and everything's going pretty well in terms of vaccines. The first time I got my shingles vaccine, it was not a fun experience. This time seems to be better, so that's good, right? But I do have times in the day when I felt really tired, and after dinner, which was like at 6:30 or whatever, I was like, I am really, really tired. I'm going to go lay down for like 20 minutes. So I went and laid down, and my wife and daughter went and ran an errand. And I got up and I came downstairs, and my son is folding laundry and watching YouTube. And, I said, where'd your mom go? And she's like, run an errand. And then I was like, hey, thank you very much for folding the laundry, because, I appreciate you doing that. That helps out. And then I literally walked into the room that I podcast in, and my wife comes home and goes, is your dad still sleeping? And my son's like, yeah, I haven't seen him. So my wife walks in here when I'm podcasting. She's like, what are you doing? You're supposed to be sleeping. Anyway, it was a funny experience on my side. That encapsulates what having a 13-year-old is like. Boy or girl, both of my kids do a very similar thing. Anyway, that question, I'm gonna have to go back and read it again. Super Cruise, that's what it was. So I don't know if that question answers my earlier Super Cruise question or not, because they said they had X amount of Super Cruise customers. I wanted to know if those however many hundreds of thousands of people that they reported were all actively subscribing, or if they actually paid for the car and then they're in that trial period or that period of time that they get Super Cruise and they don't have to pay a monthly fee. And I don't think that this answered that question. But it is good to know that the take rate after the 3 years is up is in the 40% range. I think that's pretty high. So I thought it was an interesting answer, and we'll kind of keep an eye on that. That's kind of we'll bookmark that number, and we'll see what it is maybe in a year or each quarter to see if they're continuing to grow that or stay the same, or if it's regressing at all. Anyway, sorry about my family drama. This is the last question. I know the reporter, the operator said that the last one was the last question, but it's the same person. They get to ask up to 2 questions. So this is actually the last question, and it has to do with GM and China. So let's go ahead and listen to that.
Thanks for that, Paul. My other question was on China. The company's obviously made a lot of improvements there, and I think expecting pretty similar China profits in 2026. There is a view, though, that the China market in general is becoming more difficult after a lot of stimulus in 2025, and maybe demand in the broader China market could be down this year. Maybe talk about what offsets there could be for GM specifically, perhaps just the product portfolio, but would hope to better understand what would allow GM to be more stable year on year if the market does soften. Thanks.
Well, I think, the number of vehicles that we launched this year, the new energy vehicles, I think are doing very well, over 50%, as we indicated, with the right software, the right technology, and virtually across the board, we have in China, for China solutions that I think are resonating really well in the marketplace. And I think that discipline, along with the discipline in the way the business is operating of making sure we manage inventory, which allows us to manage incentives. And it also has allowed us to have a much better relationship with the dealers because we've had a dramatic improvement in their profitability. So, I think if you want to say what's going to drive China's business overall, it's the right product portfolio and then the discipline in which we're managing the business. And I have to give a lot of credit to the team over there for really turning around that business rather quickly in a sustainable way. And then lastly, I'll just say it's also our strong brands. The Cadillac and the Buick brand have a long history, the Buick brand especially, but also the strength of the Cadillac franchise as well is serving us well. So we think we can compete, obviously not to the extent we were 5-6 years ago, but we think we can have meaningful presence there with the right product portfolio at a premium and luxury level.
All right. So we're running a little bit long, so I'll make this short. We've talked about in the past how China, the Chinese auto buyers really like Cadillacs. So I 100% echo what she's saying, that they're established brands and they're popular, premium. They're quality products. Same with Buick. Um, and it's funny. I've been seeing a lot more Buicks, like crossover SUVs recently, and I've really taken notice. They look really nice, and I could see, based on how some of the Chinese automakers have styled their cars, it does seem like the Buicks kind of have a little bit of that. The newer Buicks, anyway, have a little bit of that styling that Chinese automakers put in there, and I wonder if that's just something that I'm, those are just two things that I'm shoving together without any real facts, or am I just creating a narrative, or is that true? All right, I'm officially entering my old man era of shaking my fist and yelling at the cloud and telling the stories that nobody cares about. I feel like Grandpa Simpson. Anyway, so I remember back in my day, you used to tie an onion on your belt. Anyway, if I had to kind of sum up my feelings on this, I don't think that GM is necessarily giving up on EVs in the way that maybe some people feel like they are. I think that they are a business and they're trying to stay in business. And if they were super high on EVs in this earnings call, or any earnings call, and the demand wasn't there, I think that they would end up taking a lot of criticism, and then also the stock would drop. So having a steady path forward for EVs and having reasonable expectations, I think is a good thing. Because again, I don't think 2026 it's going to officially be the death of the EV. We're going to see lots of articles. A couple of years ago was the death of the EV too. So, it's that time of year, or that we're back in that cycle again, I should say. So I think that their messaging is, while I wish it was a little more rah EV, I do think it's appropriate. All right. So if you want to email me, it's Bodie, Bodie, at 918digital.com. If you want to follow me on X, it's 918digital. If you want to follow me on LinkedIn, where I'm a little more active than any other social media site that I have, it's Bodie, Bodie, Grimm, Grimm. I do notice, and I don't know who's doing it because I don't pay for LinkedIn because it's stupid expensive. But I noticed it'll be like, you had 30 new searches for your name. Hey, if you're searching me up, just go ahead and follow. We'll connect. Like, I want to know who you are. I want to hang out. So it's don't just lurk. Follow me. Let's see. What else? Oh, I have a website. It's 918digital.com. And if you're interested in supporting the show, you can go to supportkilowatt.com, and there you'll be able to support the show through Supercast or Patreon. And we only ask for $1 a month, which I think is reasonable, because $1 a month gets you no ads. You can give more if you'd like, but $1 a month is really all I ask for. And then you get no ads. All right. Yeah. So we're going to end the show with Mary Barra's closing remarks, and then I will talk to you all next week.
Thank you. I'd now like to turn the call over to Mary Barra for her closing comments.
Well, thanks everybody for sticking with us through the call. I know we're running a little over, so I'll be brief. But I want to start by thanking everyone in General Motors, our suppliers, our dealers, for all of their hard work to deliver the 2025 performance. But it really goes beyond that, because over the last several years, we've really built a foundation of product excellence, innovation, operating discipline, and resiliency and agility. So we know we're going to continue to see opportunities. I think we have the right team to be able to manage through those and continue to deliver results for our shareholders. So I want to tell you I'm extremely excited about this year and what we can do at even better 26, and getting North America back to the 8 to 10% margin is something that we're looking forward to executing through the year and delivering for our shareholders. So thanks, everybody, and I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Stay safe.
That concludes the conference for today. Thank you for joining. You may disconnect.